So hi, Panama Buena Vista School District. I'm here with Bree Gage and Jill Morrison. Steve Johnson's taping for us today, and I'm with Krystal Angulo, and we are going to be planning a lesson. Well, Krystal's going to be planning. I'm just going to be her Jiminy Cricket, helping her plan. And then tomorrow we're going to see Krystal in action and do some coaching. So what our tools are is our textbook, which in this case is, I was going to say StudySig. It's a benchmark. And it really doesn't matter what text we're using. Usually there's an ELD portion in every text now in the state of California. But what we found is it's not always as linguistic as we need it to be. It's more a literacy lesson rather than a language lesson. And then the other tool that we have is just this 4-pane. We've talked about this before in video. At the top, I have my language objective, and then I have input and modeling, and then structured guided practice, and then student interaction, making sure that that's half my time. I want the kids interacting together. And then what's my assessment? So how am I going to check for understanding for the students and then check for understanding at the end? So one is kind of a check for engagement, and the last one is a true assessment at the end. And this is a 30-minute lesson, so I've got my times just marked there very clearly, so I know how much time I'm going to use. So where we're going to start is with the language objective. So Krystal and I were chatting off camera about how most curricula have an ELD portion, but it doesn't really hit the language like we need it to. It's not as linguistic, if you will. So we're using a tool, and this is available on the Panama website, just in the same holder that bucket that has this information. And this is just a linguistic patterns document, functions and forms, and there's some examples, and this came from LA Unified. So what I love about this particular document, it has the fluencies across the top, but down the side it actually has the function. So what is the what of what kids are going to do. And then you'll also see, if you're a thinking map user, it has which map to use for that particular lesson, which I really love. So Krystal has a copy of that. I have a copy of that. So Krystal, you ready to roll?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's roll. Okay. So what is the ELD portion that they've suggested that you use for designated ELD tomorrow?
So I'm teaching levels 1 and 2, so I'll be using the emerging portion in this format.
Okay. And talk a little bit about what's in this particular format. What are the tools they've given us?
So far they've given us, training of, looking at the TE and kind of using it as a guide and going to your designated levels. So my students are going to be emerging. However, this would be the focus point of the lesson.
Not the outcome.
This would be my focus most of the lesson. And then if I have time, I can go to expand noun phrases with adjectives and effective oral and written language expression. And that's when we kind of seen that, okay, if this is our focus, how are we tying it to our language objective? And it wasn't, being consistent.
They don't match.
They don't match, no.
So what I love, though, is that you said you started here on this blue. It's blue in benchmark. And you know the level of your kids. And so it's a great set of tools. But what I always say about curriculum is it's like a pile of tools. And we have to say, okay, I'm going to use a hammer for this. I'm going to use a screwdriver for this. But more importantly, we have to know what we want to build, right? And that's not always super clear here. So that's where I go from. And I usually use this bottom effective oral and written language, just like support your opinion. This is usually going to be our language objective. So it's usually right here in this particular format. So Krystal and I were chatting about, okay, what are they really asking them to do? So it's asking them to support their opinion and talk about what they believe. So we went back to our linguistic patterns, and I immediately said cause and effect, didn't I? I'm like, oh, it's cause and effect. And I was super sassy about my incredible linguistic knowledge. Yeah, it was, you gotta be sassy, right? You're teaching ELD, there's a little sass. But when we really looked at it, it isn't cause and effect. It's really drawing conclusions. So let's look at drawing conclusions, and I'm just going to ask you to think about the kids in your class. Do you so you've got ones and twos,
Yes.
but it's may, right? So do you feel like they can do something about characters, like the character is or the character are? The characters are. Or do you feel like they would be ready to say, this is, the character is brave because he does this, or he is braver than the other character? This is one I love to focus on when kids are starting to approach a 3. The comparative, ER, 2 letters, when you compare 2 things, and EST, when you compare 3 or more. So, Krystal is smarter than Jill, because there are 2 of us, but Krystal is the smartest of Jill, Bree, and Krystal. So I love teaching that because 2 is ER, 2 letters. 3 is 3 or more is EST, 1, 2, 3 letters. So what do you think? Do you think that they're ready for that using this story that you've read? Or do you feel like they're still in that top number? And again, the way we picked this is we just said, okay, here's the beginning here's level, the advanced. Yeah, they're too high for this, but are they ready for that?
At this point, I know that they can perform with mastery at the beginning level. However, blank is because is where they are right now. That's their challenge.
Okay. So what if we make our language objective blank is blank, so it's going to be an adjective automatically, which is noun phrases with adjectives, right? So we picked right. Yes. What's so funny is we picked wrong, or I picked wrong out of the gate, but that's what this planning is, really, is thinking through, like, what is it really asking them to do? And I think it's also important to have this tool, because as soon as I brought that tool out, then it became clear, right? What? Mind blowing. Where are they hiding this tool? So with that in mind, why don't we plan for, he is, the character, Joe Blow, the character, is brave because, and then if they can do that tomorrow, then for the next lesson where this occurs again, we may want to bump up to that higher level. Okay?
So if that's our goal if that's our language objective, is that what we would put for our assessment or CFU, or is that going to be? Yeah,
I love that question. So we're going to put that right up here at the top.
Okay.
And that's going to be our language objective. So our language objective, and this is what I think is easiest, Krystal, honestly, is just to put that language objective as a sentence, as what is my product going to be, because that's what my objective is, right? My objective is what's it going to look like when it's done. So I would just copy it and just put blank is blank because I always label it for myself. So I'll put like noun is adjective because, and then, the rest is just the explanation. Then you're right. I love that you went smarty. You are the smartest, EST, because you understand that your closure is just going to be, can they do that?
Okay.
And I'm gonna have a small group, right? You're gonna have 10 kids, maybe 20.
23-ish.
Okay, so 23-ish. So it's not gonna be a pull-out group. It's gonna be a whole class, which is what I taught. So that's what I'm definitely most comfortable with. So could they do that for your closure? Could you give them that frame and then do a quick visual, like on? I think whiteboards are easiest if you've got them. So you're right. Whatever your language objective is, that's going to be your assessment at the end. Okay, so this language objective and this assessment are going to match. Okay, so we're just going to have them write that, and because it's a bigger group, we're going to do it on the whiteboard. Make sense? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how you're going to input and model that, and you've got some tools here from the book. So tell me how you're going to show kids how that works. Just broadly. I mean, it doesn't have to be bulleted. I mean, you're doing this every day. I know you know how to do it.
So I know I'll probably be reading the text with them or for them because they're performing with the 1-2. And then kind of while I'm reading, I know this because, and then
perfect.
And then adding the adjective later on if I want to be specific.
Got it. So yeah, I love that you said that. So I may have to read because in this focus, our focus is not on their reading, really. I mean, reading is part of language and it's part of ELD, but I always suggest during designated ELD that we focus on something that isn't reading. because if we focus on reading, our habit's going to be to teach a literacy lesson. And they actually need the how of the language. Make sense?
Yeah.
So if I move to France, I don't need someone to teach me how to read French. I need someone to teach me French.
The language.
The language, right. So our focus here is not really reading the text. It's doing something with the text we've read. So I love that. So you're gonna read through the text with them in order to give them this language, right? So I want to make sure on this input and model that I always show them the example. Now, what I don't want to do is say, write the example. I always want to have them do the example orally first and then apply the frame. And here's why. If we put up this frame as you're teaching, which you will, they're going to just try to fill in those blanks, right? To really produce language, I want them to have that conversation. So let's think of a story both of us know. Let's do the 3 pigs because we both know the 3 pigs. 3 little pigs, okay. The pig who built his house with bricks is smarter than the other pigs because he builds his house with bricks which are more permanent. Okay? So I may say, so the pig who built his house with bricks, he was the one that was smart. Okay? And that's okay because that's my conversation. Now you say, now I want you to put that into this frame. Oh, okay. So the pig who built his house with, hear the difference?
So would you have them do a think aloud with a partner initially and then introduce the frame? Okay.
And with my kids, I just said turn your whiteboard over because they were so tempted to write, right? And I had 8th graders, so they were really tempted. You know, markers, so exciting, right? And whiteboards, too, so exciting. So I actually had to have them physically turn their whiteboard over. You know, mine were just cardstock and a sheet protector so that they weren't tempted. Or you can even do pens down, voices up, you know, whatever signal. You know, again, you don't have to incorporate all this tomorrow. You know, teach your natural lesson. And then their structured guided practice is just where you're showing them. That's your doing it with them once at least. So you're showing them, then you're giving them some opportunity as you model, and then you're going to give them some structured practice with them. And then this is the key, what you just said, that think aloud where they're doing the thinking and then they're producing. Okay? So you've already got this lesson planned, right?
Kind of.
You've got it in your head. Because here's what I'm going to tell you, Krystal, that I tell everybody. Who's the best ELD teacher? The best lesson planner. So if you're having the kinds of conversations, even with yourself and an internal dialogue about, okay, what's my objective, which we just did. We looked at our chart. And you immediately went to, okay, that's got to be my closure if that's my objective. Input and modeling, you're going to show them. You're going to show them a model. You're going to show them the think aloud. Then you're going to do one with them, or more than one if they are struggling. And then you're going to have them interact with another student, and then you're going to check at the end. So with 23 kids, you may have to check a little more often, right? Because if, you know, at the kidney table, you're just like, okay, Jose, you know, work with me. But with 23 kids, you're going to have to assess a lot more often, right? So 15 minutes, again, these are times. I'm not going to be looking at time tomorrow when I come in. But I do want you to be thinking about every 5 minutes. That's how often we want to check back in with them. So talking for 5. So even adults can listen for about 10 minutes and then they need to do something. With language, it's a 5-to-1 ratio. So about every 5 minutes when they're working with student interaction, I want you to bring them back and do some kind of quick check. Make sense?
Yes. Maybe
not even checking for understanding as much as making sure they're engaged. Because in a new language, 5 minutes is about what we have. And I find that so true when I'm listening to Spanish. I'm like, okay, I'm fluent, but I still have to stop more often than I do in English.
Okay.
So tell me questions that you're thinking about, or, and again, I'm watching you teach. So this isn't about you fitting this model. So I want to take that anxiety off your plate.
This is the goal, though.
This is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
However, I'm not going to be looking for the ultimate goal tomorrow because this is the first time you've seen this.
Well, I haven't had my kids for about a week.
Oh, that'll be fun.
We've been testing.
Yeah, okay.
So my big thing at that moment would be routines and then lesson.
Yep. I think that's really important. And I'm so glad you said that, Krystal, because I say this all the time. The best lesson plan in the world will not work if kids aren't engaged. And so I think student engagement is about 95% of what we do. And I tell older kids, junior hires, where I feel like engagement's about 99% of the strategy. So yeah, the routines are critical. And again, a well-planned lesson only matters if they're engaged in that lesson. So routines first, then strategies, and then lesson. So yeah, absolutely.
Like heads up is with the student interaction, just like you said, to bring them back, I kind of remind them what they're doing and then release them again or have them switch partners because I have really, really low ones. And then I have really, really high twos.
So there's a lot of variation.
They like to group up to their person that they can talk with rather than performance levels, exposing them to lower and higher.
Got it.
Because otherwise my lowers would just stick together and look at each other and blink.
Yeah. Blind people.
I'm like, no, and now switch.
Yeah.
And they're like,
I would call it the blind leading the other blind, right? Like, all right.
Stand there.
I think about like high school language class, like none of us are very equipped here. So, and that's what you have in a designated setting. So, yeah, that's a great observation. And I think I love what you said too. Like, a 1 is not a 1, right? There's a lot of variation in every one of these language designations, and there are going to be more because next year we'll have 4 instead of 5. So the variation within each band is going to be pretty big. Anything you want me to look at specifically for feedback tomorrow?
Just making sure that I don't focus, because right here there's like this arrow. So this always made me feel like focus here. If they can achieve this, that they've accomplished, everything, the language objective, the literacy objective, it's all done. And just realizing that this is not even focused, but it is my objective.
That's correct.
In the grand scheme of things, it's the language part. This takes away so much of time, and then just to realize it's not even hitting the language. Right.
And what I think is powerful here is this is differentiating for the literacy, and this is really your language.
Yeah.
So this would be part of my literacy lesson, and I love that you've made that distinction. The hardest thing for me in teaching 1s and 2s, and for those who are watching her teaching 1s and 2s, is it's a very I don't want to say it's a slow process, but it's like glaciers moving. They're moving, you just can't see it. But eventually, they're in a different place, right? It's like time-lapse photography. And I'm sure you can see the growth over time in a year, for sure. It's amazing. But it's really those nuanced pieces of language and opportunities for kids to use them that move them. And you're right, so it is this. This is saying, hey, Krystal, when your kids are reading, use this for those kids because that's your literacy scaffold. So this is a scaffold. This is your objective. Yeah, and you've already figured that out, Smarty.
Yeah, but I like that you said scaffold.
Yeah, scaffold objective, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I even, now I'm going to probably never be welcome back to Panama Buena Vista School District. What I used to do when it was my book was I would just mark that in Sharpie for myself. When it wasn't my book, I would Post-it note it so that I actually put on here language objective so that every time I went into my book, it was almost like I was ordering my book so that I could use it more efficiently for planning, right?
Tanya Jacobson did that in the other video we created. Her whole book was tabbed up so she could do a quick reference to different parts of it. And
she had her tabs, like this one would say drawing conclusions. It would be on a Post-it at the top. So it was tabbed at the top by language. So she could easily see, And what she did is she just sat one night and did it all. What I would do, because it was the school district's teacher's edition, I would buy my own, and then I could write in it with, you know, I could make the marks that I needed to, but you can do the same thing with Post-its. Okay.
The other thing, sorry.
No, you're good.
How do we make sure that the objectives we're hitting here align with the LCAP?
Oh, okay, with the LPAC at the end?
Yes,
Okay,
LPAC,
so no, you're good. They're LCAP and LPAC, I do the same thing. I did it the other way though. I said, oh, on your is that on your LPAC? And it was their LCAP. Yeah, same letters. It's very confusing. Yeah, a little bit different. What I would say is the LPAC is a literacy test, not a language test. The language we do here will get our kids to the literacy they're going to be measured on in the LPAC. So my suggestion is that it's the way you organize the students that's going to help them on the LPAC. For example, one of the ways they test them is Bree listens to a conversation between you and me that's academic, and she is able to summarize the conversation we just had.
Without writing anything
Without
down?
writing anything down. She can write down a couple of words, like note-taking, essentially.
So exposing them to the different mediums that are being
yes,
used. Okay.
That's what I think is the best preparation for LPAC is during your ELD time, and also your literacy time, your math time. You can do it all day. You're arraying the kids in the way that they'll be arrayed for the test, like listening to two people have an academic conversation and taking down 2 notes. So what I hope is the next step in the district is that we're going to have a continuum of those arrays, like how kids are organized. We did something last summer, and I'd like to make that a little more clear so that you're grouping your kids in that way during ELD and during literacy so that they're ready for the test. So if you want them to be ready for the LPAC, it's 2 things. One is give them enough language to get literacy, because it's really a literacy test. And the second is plan for like 1 child to listen while 2 kids talk. So set up your teaching day for every kid, because it's good teaching. Set up your teaching day so they get used to that and they're in the habit of that. So for example, back in the day when SELT was new, those 4-pane pictures,
yes,
I did one every day so that my kids got used to a 4-pane picture. And we did it about academic stuff. I'm teaching 8th grade literature. So one of them was The Jacket, which is a story about a jacket, or Barrio Boy, or different selections that we were reading. I did a 4-pane. The day after, we'd read the story, and the kids told the story with 4-pane. What I was doing was having them practice language, but what I was also doing was getting them ready to look at 4 pictures and be able to tell a story. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's, I think, your key for LPAC is to use strategies of grouping that get them ready to use those strategies on the test.